So let's take a closer look. The ELPS is huge. Just like anything else, like it's a 20-page document. Who has time to sit there and look and memorize 20 pages? It's a lot, right? So it's overwhelming. So how is it that we can break it up into subsections? Well, it lends itself to that because it's already broken up into 4 subsections, okay? There's a general introduction like any book or anything would have. There's district responsibilities, so what it has to be done at the district level. Cross-curricular student expectations, these are like our TEKS, but in ELPS. What is it that we're going to expect our students to do? And then finally, the proficiency, the language proficiency level descriptors. And I'll get into those things in a little bit and tell you guys what those things are. Okay? So let's take a look. So let's look at the intro. What's in the introduction? Okay? So, introduction. Now, if you notice, well, it's kind of small. I don't give my students a lot of PowerPoints, and if I do give them a PowerPoint, anytime I'm doing something, anytime I'm giving them notes, anytime you have to think about what are the kids going to be doing, not what am I going to be doing. Okay? So if I'm doing this PowerPoint and I'm standing up here reading it to you, right? I'm like, please don't do that to me. If I'm standing up here reading it to you, with the kids, that's passive. That's very passive. Okay, and for ELL students, that's a lot of words. And they're missing like a good 85% of them. Depends on what level they are. Okay, but if they're lower ESL, lower levels, they're not going to get very much of this. So what I like to do is I like to change fonts, or I'll make something and highlight it, or I'll bold it, or I'll underline it. Key points in the stems so that they're not so lost and they're able to kind of maneuver their way through the content. Okay, so the introduction, it's several things. So it's basically saying, okay, the districts have to implement the ELPS. Okay, they're responsible for that. Whoever at central offices, like in our situation, it was Ms. Cimental, who was a bilingual director. She would make sure that we had the training that we needed to be able to address the needs of our ESL students. That their ELL success is not just academic, it's social. So most ELL students, their first language that they feel more comfortable with is on a social aspect, right? Speaking one-on-one with someone. That's not necessarily about the content area. So the district is actually responsible for providing them opportunities to be able to do that. Quality content instruction. Just because they're ELL students or just because it's a sheltered class, especially with me, I really made sure that really kind of irked me. When people say, oh, you teach the newcomer a sheltered class. Where are you? Well, what are you doing? Well, I'm doing the exact same lessons that everybody else is doing. I didn't change my content. The only thing I changed is my delivery. How is it that I needed to make that accessible to them? How is it going to be comprehensive for them? How are they going to understand it? For you guys right now, you're generally, proficient in the language. So I don't really have to stress these things. You could look at it and read it, right? But students, ELL students especially, that's just overwhelming for them. Okay, we need to give them opportunities to listen, to speak, to read, and write at their current level. So if they come into your classroom and they're beginners, meaning they're fresh, they just came from another country, then we need to give them opportunities to speak and read and write and listen at their level. We can't expect them to be able to walk in like this and then just read that. And that's so hard to get teachers to understand that, because we're like, what's the word? We're creatures of habit, right? And so what do I hear a lot from other teachers that I'm trying to train? Well, that's not going to happen in college. The professors are going to stand there and lecture, and they're not going to, I'm like, okay, well, but are we in college right now? We're not there. So our job is to scaffold it, right? My job is to teach them and get them to that point. So I can't just put up a PowerPoint slide and say, well, I covered the content. Well, yeah, but did they comprehend the content? Okay, that's our job as a teacher. That's part of your work ethic, right? Is that we need to think, okay, my job is to teach them. I hear the argument a lot, and it's like, well, I can't, they need to learn how to take notes. Well, I agree with you. Did you teach them how to take notes? Did you point out, like, we're very proficient. I'm always thinking in my head. You guys are thinking in your head. You have that voice in your head when you're reading, right? For the long time I thought, oh, am I going? No, but it's always there, right? This voice. I'm like, please turn off. And when I'm trying to go to sleep, that's the time it's talking the loudest, right? So this voice is always going on. So when we're reading something, especially like if it's not like literature, if it's expository text, if it's like textbook, I'm self-correcting all the time, right? I just don't know this, but we're doing it. As I'm reading, I'm like, oh, I didn't know what that word means. I have to go back. Or I think I skipped something. I don't understand this. I have to read it again. If I'm answering questions, I don't start reading the whole thing from the beginning. I start scanning headings. I look for pictures. I look at captions. You do this automatically, but kids don't know you're doing this. So you have to think out loud all the time, and you need to get in the habit of saying, what is it that I'm actually doing? Because you are the expert. So we need to teach them. They think, oh, you're just so smart. And of course we want to say, yeah, I'm like super smart. I just know how to do this. But no, we need to tell them, yes, this is going on in my head. I didn't understand it the first time, so I had to read it again, right? So we need to give them those tools. It applies from kindergarten to 12th grade, and it's not grade specific. Okay, so it doesn't mean like, okay, only freshmen have to take this and other classes. No, everybody. Okay? So district responsibilities, that's the general introduction. District responsibilities. So what is the district required to do for you? Okay? And it is perfectly fine to ask for help. Okay? And you need to become very proactive because districts are ginormous. I'm very blessed that I work in a tiny district, right? So it's very hard for me to get lost. First of all, because I'm kind of loud. And two, because I'll ask. Right? And it's a small place. But when you go into large districts like Isleta or Socorro or EPISD, it's very easy for you to get lost. So you need to become very proactive. And if you need that help, you need to find that help. And the district is required for them to identify students. Okay? They need to tell you what level your students are at. Okay? You're not the one testing, especially if you're in a non-English content area, if you're like in science or math or social studies. It is perfectly allowable for you to address that and ask your administration to give you their levels. That should be information that's accessible to you. Okay? So you need to know if you have a kid sitting in your classroom and he's an intermediate student, you need to know that. Okay? And I can't stress the importance enough of you guys to take the initiative and ask them, okay? Plus, they love it. Why? Because they know that you care. You know, they want to know that you're interested in the kids that are in your classroom, and you need to know what level they're in. Provide instruction that is commensurate with the student's level to ensure that the student learns required curriculum, not the fancy word, right? Okay, that's exactly what it means. That it's at the level of what you're supposed to be teaching. We're never going to water down. Excuse me. We're not supposed to water down. If you're teaching, and I'm sorry, how many of you are going to be in elementary? I didn't think about that. I'm just so high school like. And the rest of you guys, high school? Middle school, God bless you. Middle school teachers are a special breed. Oh my goodness. Because those kids they don't know what they are. They don't know if they're kids or they're adults. They're like bipolar. They're like, you're like, who do I have right now? It's kind of crazy. So it's fun. Good luck. Okay. So commensurate means at the level. So if I'm supposed to be teaching that, that means I'm supposed to teach that for everybody that's in my classroom. If they're special ed, if they're GT, if they're ELL, or if they're like in my campus, very rare, just that one regular kid, right? When I print out my rosters, every kid is coded as something. Economically disadvantaged, they're either migrant students, they're ESL students, they're GT, they are SPED. I have some, they're always something. And it's very rare when I look up the kid and there's nothing there. I'm like, who's this kid? Like, it's like the one regular kid on the campus. I get maybe one, right? The rest of them, there's something going on with them. It needs to be linguistically accommodated, and it needs, especially for this last one, for kids who are just starting, they're beginning, and they're intermediate, okay? The district needs to provide intensive, ongoing foundation of instruction. It needs to be an ongoing process with them. You can't just stick them in there and then leave them alone, okay? It needs to be, we need to be following up with them. How is that we can raise their level of capacity, okay? Now, curriculum. Curriculum is a district responsibility. That's something that the district basically tells you, this is a curriculum we're going to use, okay? Now, there's three things that curriculum has to be. One of them, it has to be communicated. If you don't know what the heck it is, then there's a problem. There's a breakdown, right? But not only to the teacher, but to the students. The students need to know. So, for example, on the agenda, the first thing I gave you guys was an objective, right? So that you know what I'm going to be expecting from you at the end of this. Okay. So how can you do this? How can you convey your curriculum? Visuals, okay? TPR, total body response. You know, and again, we have to really get out of our comfort zone, and I'm not quite there yet with TPR. There's some people who are just like great, like my best friend, she teaches also. And if I say something about anything, she like wants to do a song. That would be a total body response, okay? That, for some reason, I could do. I don't know why, but I can't sing a song for you. I'll throw myself on the floor, but I won't sing a song. Clear explanation of the task. Now, this is even for adults. We have a short attention span, and I was thinking about this today, and I've really been thinking about this as I was planning this. I'm like, how long can I keep their attention to do it for them? Because it's too many steps, and they can't follow you, okay? And then use your use of resources in their native language. Now, this is like very controversial, right? This is an ongoing debate that will happen forever, right? Well, I'm trying to get them to speak English. Why am I going to speak Spanish to them? Or why am I going to let them read something in Spanish? Well, if they're beginners, what the heck? They're not going to know what you're saying. All right, sequenced. Now, this is something that I think I've gotten pretty good at. I'm very deliberate. Very rarely do I do something in the classroom that I didn't do on purpose. Okay, so you have to plan for that. You need to, for me, what do? I visualize. I'm a very visual person. I visualize, okay, what is this going to go like? And part of it is out of fear. When I was thinking about this and really thinking about why I do it, part of it is out of fear. I never want to be caught off guard, especially in a classroom with 30 kids. If you're not ready, and high school students, they'll eat you up. You're gone. Right? If I don't have enough work, or if I don't have something planned from the beginning all the way to the end, what's that classic saying that the idle mind is a devil's playground? They could come up with some pretty interesting things when they're not busy or you don't have something planned and deliberate for them to do. So I dread that. I really try to avoid that at all costs, and the kids know that. So what happens sometimes is that they're working on something and they're getting close to it, and they're like, take a little bit longer because they know that if they stop, I'm like, okay, let's go on to the next thing. They're like, oh. I'm like, I'm not, I know that what's going to happen. If I don't have you busy. My biggest pet peeve is when you walk past classrooms and students are standing at the door. What does that tell me? As administration, what does that tell me? That tells me that I wasn't ready for them. That tells me that my lesson was not planned right. If the kids, out of 52 minutes, some of your classes are even less than that, 49 minutes. If they have 10 minutes to stand at the door, that means I was able to do something for 39 minutes? No, like, that's my time. I tell the kids, once you're with me, you're mine. And I have you for 52 minutes, and those 52 minutes are mine. So please don't be one of those people who has like a line at your door and the kids are ready to climb out. That drives me bonkers. That means I was not ready. Okay? Pre-teaching social and academic vocabulary. Okay, scaffolded. For some reason, I always had a hard time with this one. I couldn't grasp it. When people would talk about scaffolding, when I first went into teaching or when I first started doing like ESL classes and stuff, wow, it has to be scaffolded. It has to be scaffolded. And I was like, I couldn't come up with like a mental image. Like, I was like, what does that mean? And finally, a few years ago, I had an epiphany. I was like, oh, that's what they've been talking about the whole time. Well, okay, we have to scaffold for them. And when I think about a scaffold, I always thought, yeah, like the scaffolding that they put around buildings, right? okay. I'm like, well, that's great. What does that, I don't understand. But then afterwards, and I'm like, oh, well, the scaffolding's not there all the time. It's only there while they're building, right? Hopefully, once the building's done, the scaffolding is taken away, right? And do they build it, like say, you know, they're working on the first floor and they've only gotten one floor up, right? Do they put 3 levels of scaffolding up yet? No, right? They do it 1 level at a time. I was like, oh, that's what they mean. Okay, so with ESL students, we have to get them there. But we need to remember the ultimate goal is to remove that scaffolding so that they're independent. Okay, so they should receive structured support that leads to their eventual independence. They shouldn't be dependent on you the whole time. Okay, so orally, paraphrasing, you give them wait time, you help translate if you have to, if these are beginners or newcomer students, but that doesn't mean you're going to do that all the way to the end of the year. Okay? Procedural, whole class to group to individual, it lowers the anxiety level. So what does that mean? What does that look like? So I could ask you, based on the information that you guys have there on your notes, how many subsections are there in the ELPS? I'm asking you. There's 4, good. There's 4, good. Okay, so you guys, this group right here, because you looked at me, you made the mistake of making eye contact. There you go. Okay. That's what happens. Like they're like, they already know that all of a sudden their feet become very interesting. Okay, so your group, what's the first one? What was the first subsection, and generally what were they talking about? You have your notes in there. You could look at them. Don't freak out. It starts with an I. Introduction, very good. And what's the purpose of an introduction in any kind of writing? Not necessarily just in these notes. What's the purpose of an introduction in any kind of writing? In a science book, in a history book, in a literature book?
To get you started and to guide you to see what's going to be later on.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, so that's whole to group to individual. Okay, and if you start following that pattern, then the anxiety level starts to kind of drop a little bit, okay? Especially, like, say, for example, if she was a true ELL student, I don't know if you are. Were you? Yeah? Okay. I was too. I was like a special kid. My mom took me to the doctor, I don't know how many times, she's like, there's something wrong with this child. And the doctor's like, there's nothing wrong with this child. She's just very active. Now, if you would have taken me, if I was a kid now, they would be like, she has ADHD and this kid's crazy. But I had a speech impediment, and I had to take speech therapy for 4 years. And they ended up holding me back a grade because they wanted to put me like in a special building. This is like early 80s, so back then it was not like mainstream. So they wanted to put me in a whole separate campus. My mom's like, no, there's nothing wrong with her intelligence. You just don't know what she's saying, but there's nothing wrong with her. So, you know, for example, if you were an ELL student, or if you were a student that was like in my case, it helps if you give me a heads up. So say, for example, if I was roaming around, whatever, I could have come over here and I'm going to ask you a question about this, okay? I'm going to ask you about introductions. So start thinking about what they're about, okay? Of course, I wouldn't say that in front of everybody. I would just, you know, very slightly tell her. You might be around here, okay? So that way, when it comes down to it, then she experiences success. She's able to answer the question. Her anxiety level drops, and then that's a good thing. She's able, amongst her peers, she feels like she was able to accomplish something, okay? So procedural. And then finally instructional, like some sentence stems. I could have put that up saying, an introduction is used for. Okay? I don't speak that way. You don't speak that way. That's kind of weird, right? Somebody speaks that way all the time. Right? I don't like say that. An introduction is used for, I don't say that. That's not normal language for me. And it wouldn't be for them either, right? They would be like, pues miss, es que we use an introduction, right? That's the way they would talk. So if I want them to use certain words, if you give them sentence stems, then they're able to use that in their speech and in their writing, okay? Once you start picking up patterns and models for them. All right.